I'm Nick Thorpe, and this is a project that I stumbled on in Bolivia when I was traveling around looking for newspaper stories to finance my travels. It's actually a 60-foot ocean-going boat built out of reeds on the shores of Lake Titicaca. And just coming up is what it looked like after we'd trucked it to Chile and put a cabin, masts and sails on it. And I say we because I immediately asked if I could join this expedition, even though I was just a journalist passing through. And amazingly, I was allowed to join with 7 other guys on a 2,500 mile journey to Easter Island. I say amazingly, actually what was perhaps more amazing in the end was I was almost the best qualified on board, because my crewmates included a tree surgeon and a jewellery salesman, useful in the Pacific. And it was really one big experiment, according to the US expedition leader, Phil Buck, who was actually a mountaineer. And maybe adventures are always actually experiments. The official aim was to show how ancient mariners might have navigated directly to Easter Island from South America, but mostly it was a journey, a good old-fashioned adventure, a chance for me to force myself into close community with 7 guys and a duck. I might expand on that later. So here we are, desperately trying to change the sails and turn around as part of a man overboard drill. But as we never really worked out how to turn around in less than about 20 minutes, the advice really was don't fall overboard. And if all else failed, you could swim for a rope with a buoy at the end of it, but a shark bit that one day, so we tried not to do that either. Our fishing exploits had a risky start until these flying fish obligingly flew into the side of our cabin, giving us bait to catch the tuna you saw earlier. And this is Eric, one of the Aymara boat builders, who was probably the main expert on board, really. He knew the main drawback to reed boats, which is that they sink, little by little, from the moment that they're launched. So here we are, a lot closer to the water, after a couple of very drenching storms, not to mention a near miss with a freighter in the middle of the night. But luckily, we were just arriving here. You can see the pinnacles of outlying rocks of Easter Island after 44 days at sea. Now, these are the famous statues, obviously, and I've included them partly because they look proud, self-reliant, but also slightly lonely. Typical guys, in other words, really. And this trip really helped me to challenge that individualist tendency that I have and force me to connect with other people. I mean, basically, I had to ask for help quite a lot. So scroll forwards a few years and I decided to build a whole journey built on human connections. Here I am beginning a 5-month boat hitching trip around Scotland. This is a guy called Craig who gave me my first lift on the Union Canal from just outside my door in Edinburgh. I mean, the idea, as a slightly reserved Englishman, was to force myself to ask for help from complete strangers every single day. It took me to all kinds of places and on 37 different kinds of boats, I think. This one ended up being about 2,500 miles as well, after various meanderings up the west coast and to Shetland and down the other side. And I met some very interesting people on the way, as you can see. This was the strangest thing I had to do in return for a lift. Dress up as a monk with some rowers recreating the voyage of St. Columba and attempt to evangelise pagan Scotland in an outdoor church service. As you can see from my expression, it wasn't my best day. Actually, if seafarers have a creed in common, I think it's that we're all quite small and vulnerable in the vastness of nature, and we need each other. Something that we forget in a consumerist society, I think. And that's ultimately, I think, why I go on adventures, to learn how to belong in the world. By the end of my voyages, I certainly felt I belonged in Scotland a lot more. Here I am working my passage on a square rigger through the Outer Hebrides. And as an unpaid skivvy for a week, I learned lots of Scottish things, like being called a worthless gobshite is actually a term of endearment. It's called banter, I think. This is me scrubbing furiously at the deck. And I'm including this one because back in everyday life, I'm actually quite susceptible to burnout. And I think I used to think, like a lot of explorers, that sheer willpower could get me almost anywhere. But I discovered one day that willpower was like oil, an expendable resource. Because as I was finishing this book, I kind of burnt out. And this is my dog Charlie, who is my spiritual guru, because he doesn't burn out. He distinctively knows, instinctively, when to go on adventures and when to lie in the sun with his legs in the air. So after recovering from burnout, I decided to follow his example and learn to let go a little. Though predictably, I turned it into a year-long project. This is my first attempt to let go, although it was really more about holding on, I guess. But what it certainly did was help me focus on the present moment. It's really hard to do anything else when you're flying towards the ground at 150 miles an hour. But for a real sense of terror, try going on a personal development workshop. Here I am, just about to subject myself to a clowning weekend, which turned out to be as exhilarating as it was mortifying, although not quite as mortifying as a naturist convention I attended a few weeks later. Don't worry, no pictures of that one coming up. Over the year, I experimented in all kinds of ways, basically. Just up next is me in a forest in Sweden with lots of hippies doing a firewalking session. But what did I learn over the whole year? I think, as a slightly driven guy, I discovered I didn't always have to do battle with my shortcomings. I could learn to befriend them. And paradoxically, I found the more I accepted myself as I am, the more I changed. Sometimes willpower is good, sometimes kindness is good. I did another raft voyage, this time with my two brothers on a river in Sweden, and we went very, very slowly, and that was fantastic. And by then I did feel happier, less driven, and ready for another kind of challenge altogether. Because soon after I came home, my wife and I were approved to adopt a 3-year-old boy, who's my son now. And that's why I'm delighted tonight to be supporting a charity that brings hope and homes to children who should have had a better start in life and had their own adventures. And for me, that's been the biggest adventure of all. Thank you very much.